Good evening and welcome to tonight, Monday, March 18th, 2024 City Council meeting. I'd ask for a motion to exit the non-public and to seal the minutes of the non-public session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Kelly, and when you're ready, could you please take the roll?
Mayor McEachran,
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Tabor,
Here.
Councilor Cook,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Blaylock,
Here.
Councilor Bagley,
Here.
Councilor Moreau,
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
Thank you, Kelly. Before we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like us just to remember for a moment Cal Caney, who passed away on February 9th. We were lucky enough to honor a marina, the Prescott Park Marina, in his honor just back in September. He was always incredibly funny and witty and could just pull something out of his pocket that spoke to the moment, and he did speak to the moment back in September. He was the city manager, for those that might not remember, from 1970 to 1991. Those were a couple of big decades in Portsmouth. A lot that changed. He ushered in a lot of that change, and when you think of Market Square and all that's gone on there, to put us a bunch of lists, he was instrumental in that. And that the thing that I guess, it's a lot of folks mention that he never felt he worked for the council, and that's probably how it should be. He was worked for the people of Portsmouth, held them in incredibly high regard. He was, in a lot of ways, that man behind the curtain, but he was always pulling the levers for the citizens of Portsmouth, and in that way, we are always going to be grateful. And Cal, thanks for holding the door open for as long as you did, and even after you left, the City Post went on the PDA and did a lot of good there. So just take a moment, reflect on Cal Caney and all the work that he's done that will live on far longer than he has. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will take, we have the acceptance of minutes for February 5th.
Your Honor, I move that we approve and accept the minutes from the February 5th, 2024 City Council meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And next, we have the Public Art Review Committee, Park, recommendation of public art for Bohenko Gateway Park.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to invite up our committee chair, Chris Dwyer, to speak to the council.
Great. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm with Nancy London, who is a member of the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Legacy Committee, and Terrence Parker, who's the artist that we'll talk about. And we want to explain our request that the council accept a plan for proposed artwork for the pavilion in Bohenko Gateway Park. And just a little word of sort of transition here. This project began under the Portsmouth 400 Legacy Committee, which brought us Shija Chen's Endeavor sculpture. And this project is funded with a grant and leftover donations from that project. So that's kind of the transition that the Public Art Review Committee is picking up. With the Portsmouth 400 sunsetting, Park is going to has assumed the review. We did a review of the proposed plan. We've had a discussion with the artist, and we would oversee the work going forward. Obviously, it's coming to you because it would be on city property and attached to a city structure. the Portsmouth 400 Legacy Committee asked Terrence Parker to enhance the aesthetics of the pavilion, to tie it into the maritime sculpture that for which the park is designated. You know, we've got the one piece there, but the idea is that there would be 3 or 4 additional pieces. And we only had a modest amount of money, so not enough money to commission at this point another major work, but enough money to make the pavilion look like it's a planned piece, a sculptural piece. And I think you'll be pleased to see what Terrence has come up with that would enable us to do that. So Terrence has a few slides. He's going to share the plan with you. And then we're all here to ask questions, but you have in written form our review. Those comments came from our review, and an opportunity to ask a lot of questions about it. I know Peter Rice from Public Works has also had an opportunity to review this. You'll see in the proposal, we have asked some support from the Department of Public Works for painting and preparation of the ceiling and supports, but we understand that if there are any costs involved, that would be covered by the leftover donations that we have. So with that, I'll let Terrence show you the plan.
Hello, I'm Terrence Parker, the sculptor here. As Chris said, I was asked by the Legacy Committee to change the character of the pavilion at the Pohenco Park and keep with the maritime theme. I don't know if you know the retired UNH historian named Jeff Bolster from Portsmouth. Well, he wrote this amazing book called The Mortal Sea. It's about the history of fishing from pre-Vikings up until contemporary society. It's a really fascinating book, and in that book he tells the story about, you know, how cod, of all fish and all the other fish, how cod created the economy that New England has known to love. It spurred in the shipbuilding industry, in the shipping industry, and just created the economies of pre-colonial times, colonial times, and I think we're still driving forward on from that initial investment in shipbuilding. Jeff also tells a story about how the oceans were perceived as infinite and endless, and just an endless resource to just mine and mine and mine. And as we know, that is not the case. He tells the story of, the Basques had the secret fishing. You know, no one knew where the Basques got their fish, but they would pull them up from, the Gulf of Maine in the 1500s. So Jeff tells that whole story, and I sunk my teeth into that book, and I decided that the story I wanted to tell at the pavilion was the story about cod, which is really the story about the seacoast. So there are some slides there. That's the view of the pavilion. There are lights in there, but my intention is to change all the lighting. Paint the ceiling, so some kind of aquamarine blue, really dark blue, to hide some of the structure. I think there's another slide of the structure. Next one, maybe.
Hold on. Doesn't want to go, but give me 1 second.
So I want to, first of all, paint the underside of the structure so you don't see all the, all the structure of the ceiling, because there's metal. And there's a lot of, and there's the white underside of the roofing. And then the next thing is to insert new lights, LED blue lights, similar to the lights that are on the Memorial Bridge. It's the same lighting consultant that I've been working with. So the concept is to, paint the ceiling, drench the whole environment with blue, and to sculpt out of wood, because it's the most affordable material, 20 codfish that would go from 4 feet to 2 feet. So it suggests the time, because codfish were massive back in the 15 and 1600s. They could get up to 150 or 200 pounds. Now they're quite small. So the big ones would be in the back to the left, and the smaller ones would be more numerous and out in the open air. So it also suggests time, and it's really a school of fish because one of the things I didn't know what the word shoals meant. It really means school, so it's school of fish because the Isle of Shoals was a famous cod drying island. They used to put the racks up there and dry the cod. So it's pretty integral to the seacoast. So there's another picture of the proposal. So what I want is to be able to have people walk underneath there and get the inverted experience of being in a marine environment. And then the blue lights would cast the shadow of the fish onto the pavement, and they would be hung with stainless steel wires. And yeah, there's my little mock-up. So cod has a distinctive swoosh on its side. And it was the bottom feeder. The little beard is, I think from scientists say that that's how it figures out. It's really on the bottom. It hangs that little beard. And it's really a fantastic story about cod. And so I'm trying to tell that story here. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Terrence. Any questions? Sister Mayor.
And just a clarifying question. So the maintenance of the lights and the cost of the maintenance and anything like that is going to be paid for by the funding that is currently had? This might be more of a
I believe so, but there should be little maintenance to the lights. The lights will probably be the least maintenance. I think. Chris, do you have a definitive answer on that?
As Terrence said, that was one thing we took into account, that probably light bulb changes with LED lights is the maintenance. The fish will be varnished with a marine varnish, so they'll be, as good as they can be to the weather. We do know that in the Public Art Trust, one of our goals is to keep a kitty in there that will be used for maintenance of things over time. But one of the nice things about this is not only is the original cost modest, but likely going forward, the cost would be pretty modest.
Thank you.
I'm glad Chris mentioned that because I did consult with some boat builders nearby. So they're going to be sealed with epoxy. So it's going to be sealed similar to the way a boat is sealed, and it's much more out of the environment than a boat is, obviously, because it's in a shelter. But so that was kind of the fun part, is to talk to boat builders about the actual production of it.
And do you anticipate the lighting being on 24 hours a day? Okay.
Any other questions of the council? Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you. I think this looks very exciting. I love that we're celebrating, the cod. Would it be able to withstand like high wind or a high windstorm? Just your sculptures and the.
Well, that's a great question. So a lot of this will be kind of field adjusted because they'll be hung. Each codfish will be hung by 2 wires, so they won't swivel. They'll all be in the same direction. And I'm hoping to, as I hang that, to create so they don't swing so erratically back and forth. And I don't anticipate the wires ever getting tangled up like that, because I think I'll try to keep the distance. But it's one of the things that I don't have a definitive answer until we actually, get up there and start hanging this stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Looking forward to it. Oh, Councilor Cook.
Oh, no, I was just going to go ahead and make a motion. I would move that we accept the proposed plan for artwork, including support from the Department of Public Works for painting and preparation of the site.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, guys. Next up, public comment. First up, Sean Muskie of Portsmouth on agenda item 13D.
Hello, my name is Sean Muskie. I'm a Portsmouth resident. I'm a resident of Sherburne neighborhood. We find ourselves here again talking about that Sherburne project. I'd just like to remind you all that by and large, the neighborhood doesn't support it. We don't think it fits our neighborhood. The size and the scope of it is certainly out of alignment with what our neighborhood's about. And now Craig Welsh is here today to ask you all for a letter to send to the New Hampshire congressional delegation basically asking for money from them, from the government. Craig Welsh has a family member that's part of that delegation. I think that's probably inappropriate that he would ask that of you, especially with a family member being part of that delegation. We don't support this. We feel that you as a council are about to just kind of push it right through, ignore what we have to say about it, ignore that we don't support it. We had a lot of studies about different locations that could have been another location for something very similar. Each one had an objection. Each one of those objections could also be applied to the Sherburne property as well. So really, in a nutshell, we don't support this. We don't think that it's the right thing to do for our neighborhood. And we hope that you guys will keep that in mind as you guys push forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Next up is Genevieve Beckstead-Muskie on the topic of Sherburne.
Good evening. Genevieve Beckstead-Muskie, 9 Sherman Avenue. I am a resident of Panaway Manor. I ask you a question today. What does it mean to be a good listener? A good listener hears the wants and needs of others. A good listener takes the time to stop talking and consider the thoughts and input of others. A good listener listens. When the idea to give land for the development of workforce housing came forward, a presentation was prepared and delivered to this council and the community. However, when it was presented to the residents of Panaway, they had an opportunity to speak out, and you stopped listening. When our neighborhood came together at an untelevised meeting, the vast majority spoke out in opposition due to the adverse impact it will have on our small neighborhood, and not to mention the loss of yet another recreational field and more green spaces. The last 1% this city has that is available, we cannot afford to lose. What was presented was 160 unit apartments, which will come with an average of 320 cars per unit, for the units. This is something that was not considered because I was told parking was not a factor. Where are these cars going to go? I do not understand that you consider this. I was told that parking was not a factor, and where are these cars going to go? I am now to understand that you consider it to be reduced to 80 units. That will average 160 cars. And still, no consideration for the parking of these vehicles. Not to mention that all the residents of Panaway must pass this property to exit our neighborhood because there is one way in and one way out. The only downside, I might add, to the Atlantic Heights property per the Land Use Committee. But for Panaway, you didn't see that as an issue. The Land Use Committee was tasked with finding the most appropriate use for Lister Academy. And what they did was present Lister Academy on a silver platter as the only location to accomplish what this board was tasked to do. Surrender Lister Academy, a location that doesn't meet the needs for this project. Workforce housing are residents close to a multitude of job opportunities, close to retail locations with access to public transportation, none of which are features of Lister Academy. I recently participated in Portsmouth Listens, an ironic name for a project that spoke out about how expanding our public transportation would benefit our community rather than further weakening our adversely impacted infrastructure that cannot handle what we are going to do with the overdevelopment of this community. Yes, Portsmouth is a wonderful place to live. Stop vilifying the residents of Panaway for wanting our green spaces and a peaceful existence. Our requests don't have an adverse impact on you or this community, but your agenda does have an adverse impact on us. Stop working so hard to destroy a community that we love to live in. Stop telling us what we need and listen to what we want. Be a good listener. Leave Panaway alone.
Thank you, Genevieve. Next up is Ruben Izagirre on the topic of Sherburne. You can just pass it and we'll pass it down.
Please let it be recorded in the minutes that I submitted a petition against the Sherburne Housing Project, 180 signatures against the Sherburne Housing Project. Please record that in the minutes.
For the minutes, is there a date on these?
It was a date of that meeting when,
Okay.
non-televised meeting. I had submitted this before, but I've never heard anything. When this council speaks in platitudes about the housing crisis in our city, what they are actually doing is attempting to disguise their dubious intention of transferring public land to a private organization for free. This egregious action will provide millions of dollars of cash flow in near perpetuity for the PHA at the expense of the city and its taxpayers. This is in addition to its unnamed investors and developers making handsome profits from this very lucrative deal that I'm sure that they are salivating over. This council aims to manufacture a false sense of endorsement from the community with their dog and pony show committees and crocodile tear speeches from PHA employees. Nothing could be further from the truth, as shown in the first meeting on this project, with nearly unanimous opposition and 180 signatures gathered from the neighborhood residents who are against this money siphoning scheme. There is no way the City Council can guarantee these units will go to people who work in Portsmouth, even though that's their primary selling point. This council uses the workforce housing cliche as a vehicle to abuse the empathy of our citizens and bilk them out of land and property taxes, for which the PHA pays almost none. At the end of the day, they don't care who fills those units, whether they work in Portsmouth or not, as long as the PHA gets their never-ending cash flow and free land while paying almost no property taxes, and their developer buddies get their sweetheart, no-bid construction projects and guaranteed investment returns. Residents have brought up very many legitimate concerns about this project over numerous meetings, but it appears the financial interests of the PHA and construction companies take precedence. Us naysayers are smeared as NIMBYs. It very well seems that this deal was inked long ago in private backroom agreements. As a representative of the signatories of the petitions in front of you, we demand that the mayor deny the letter of support to Craig Welch for the project at the Sherburne School. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. Next up is Jeff Doro on the South Meeting House.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Jeff Doro. I live at 260 Marcy Street, next door to the South Meeting House. There has been a lot of discussion regarding the South Meeting House and a proposal submitted to Portsmouth for its use, and I wanted to give everyone an update from residents that abut or live near that building. I am part of a group in the South Meeting House that has had some discussions of virtual meetings regarding the building and ideas for future use that maintain the historic charm, integrity, and personality of not only the South Meeting House, but also the immediate neighborhood and the South End as a whole. We had the privilege to meet with some members of the council to express our interests of future use that captured the city's charm, tourist interests, and culture. We discussed the history of the building, some potential uses, and the need for funds attached to those future uses. We also discussed the need to retain the 72-hour parking spots used by the neighborhood residents, a number of which have no driveways. Living next to the South Meeting House, there is not any weekend that goes by where I don't see tourists that walk through the South End and take photos of the building and its majestic clock tower. It's iconic, it sits high and anchors the south end. Along with the Strawberry Bank, Prescott Park, and other historically well-preserved and maintained buildings in the south end, it is a tourist destination. It needs to stay that way. Some ideas for usage that provide a revenue stream to the city and also attract culture is to implement art galleries or art studios for both local and non-local artists. Other towns on the Seacoast have been successful attracting non-resident artists with a place to work on and showcase art. As a historic building, this location provides the history, charm, proper location, and character that is appropriate for the arts. Our group had the pleasure of speaking with a woman who lives in the South End, who has a business working with hundreds of artists overseas. She expressed a strong interest in helping to make this idea successful, as this is her world. We also talked about the potential for minority and women-owned businesses renting part of the space, with art studios using up the other parts. I know of a few women-owned businesses interested in occupying some of the space already. With small businesses paying monthly rent, this revenue would help pay for the building's maintenance and upkeep, and possibly make the art studios more affordable and attractive. With day businesses occupying part of the space, many of the parking spots would still be accessible to local residents, especially in the evening. We discussed the financial and hands-on support of abutting and area residents to assist the city with keeping its historic and cultural flavor for future appropriate uses. Additionally, I don't believe we have the only group of residents in the South End to form a committee for preservation of the South Meeting House. I'm happy to hear there's a request for a work session regarding the South Meeting House in April. Our group in the South End as a whole have many ideas for best use to attract arts and tourism. We'd like to have our voices heard when appropriate. Thank you for the kindness and receptiveness to those who have been spoken with us. You've been patient, understanding, and willing to listen. We appreciate the work you all do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Next up, Irish Mike on the topic of respect.
Michael Harden, Orchard Street. I was never so disgusted as I was at the last council meeting as a taxpayer, the way you treated the taxpayers. Basically, this session is for anybody, for free speech. They can comment on issues or concerns that's for them. The first gentleman that spoke last time, he was in favour of Israel. I don't know what he spoke about, but when he sat down, crosstalk broke out, and the mayor just spoke up and asked him to take it outside. And then maybe a dozen people spoke in favour of Palestine, and there was never any objection to that. But anytime anybody spoke in favour of Israel, it sounded like there was a clicker. Somebody back there behind me tried to muffle the speaker. Every speaker that spoke about Israel, they tried to muffle what they were saying. And then the last lady that spoke, she said she was Jewish. She's a taxpayer. She lives in Portsmouth, and she was talking about globalized Intifada. Globalized Intifada. It's an Arabic saying. And what it means rise up or resist. That came about in the 2000s. It came about. Hamas came up with that saying to resist, to kill the Jews. Those suicide bombings, and then they came about 10 years later. It came up again, and the second time there was over 1,000 Israelis killed, and every time. The cells in LA, New York, and multiple different places in Boston, they use that phrase, and the idea of using that phrase is to incite violence. And after last spring, after all that was happened to the Jewish temple and the way they were treated, for somebody to come up to talk, say she was uncomfortable, people are down in Market Square shouting "globalized Intifada," which is basically inciting violence against Jews. Her a Jewish person, she said, I feel uncomfortable about that. when she was saying that, a woman right behind her said, you should feel uncomfortable. So basically, she's inciting violence. And you just sat there, Mayor. You should have silenced that woman, and you should ask her to leave. Because basically, she was inciting violence, and it's disgraceful. And people shouldn't be allowed to say that down in Market Square in front of the church, right in public. Because that's what they're doing. They're inciting violence, and it's disgraceful that it's allowed.
Thank you, Irish Mike. I did gavel that comment as I gavelled the previous comment as they were disruptive to the conversation. Next up is Robin Schnell on gateway zones to G1.
Good evening. Robin Schnell. I live at 109 Spring Street, and I just came tonight to speak out in favor of changing the zoning for Lafayette and Woodbury Avenues to be G1 gateway mixed-use neighborhoods. I was part of the housing conversation, and one of the things that kept coming up was that we want to create complete neighborhoods, not just more housing. So that includes housing for a variety of income levels and also a variety of abilities to get around. So also those two gateway corridors especially should be should have mass transit that can enable people to get to and from work in a timely manner without cars. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. Liz will come right back to you at the end. Eric Anderson on the subject of PHA.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. My name is Eric Anderson, 38 Georges Terrace in Portsmouth. In a simple letter from the Portsmouth Housing Authority, Craig Welch, he requested the Portsmouth City Council to contact the New Hampshire congressional delegation for monies related to community project funding and seemed to relate this request for the Sherburne School site. Reading between the lines, a series of questions arises that don't appear to have complete transparency. As a member of the newly formed Housing Committee, which I'm excited to participate in and will do enthusiastically, there has been only one meeting with no specific discussion or determination of the Sherburne School site to be the primary location for any workforce or affordable housing projects. I don't believe the Portsmouth City Council has taken a collective vote to designate the Sherburne School site for any housing projects. And with respect to a couple of councilors, they have a preference for that site. What if any formal contract arrangements has been made between PHA and the city, and what if any cost to Portsmouth taxpayers can be expected? How much money is PHA requesting the city to recommend to our congressional delegation? Most importantly, how big a project is PHA soliciting HUD for funding at the Sherburne location? This has had no discussion within the Housing Committee. I don't, in the letter it mentions the March 22nd date, which I wasn't well explained, but apparently that's some type of drop dead date for PHA to submit a formal request for funding from HUD. I believe it might be HUD. With all those questions, I just submit to you, there is not a sense or feeling of complete transparency within the subject, and potentially translates, which I hope not, to the newly formed Housing Committee as a formality. Any answers to these questions are requested in your discussion on this topic within the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Next up, Francis Cormier, Jesse and Weave. Francis just left, I think. Okay, Manny Garganta on the PHA letter.
Manny Garganta, 471 Colonial Drive. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, City Manager. Eric pretty much took a lot of my thunder. That's when you're related, we talk going off. I had also brought up, we talked about the one meeting that the Blue Ribbon Committee's had, and then I happened to get a copy of the letter, and PHA was always under the gun at a certain drop-dead date. When we had that first meeting, they had to get everything in so they could go and get these credits or whatever. Now he gives the city council 4 days to come up with a letter. Now, you think, being the manager that he is, he'd already thought about this in the future, to jump ahead of this and get it on so you don't have to run and scramble to get this done. My feelings on what is going to go in there has nothing to do with this right now. Hopefully, if it ever gets done, if it is going to be done, it's tasteful, and I don't want to see that place covered. I happen to go to the Lister's last maple sugaring thing this weekend. That building may cost some money to get done. There's no reason they can't do something with it. Basically, I agree with Eric. Thank you.
Thanks, Manny. Next up, we have, going back to Liz. Elizabeth Bratter on the G1 rezoning.
Good evening. Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. These zoning changes are based on a great premise. The catch is the cost to build anything these days is very high, and with good intentions and quality products, it is hard to come up with something affordable as units of the past. The majority of new units in Portsmouth have come with no affordable or workforce housing, or reduced the number significantly due to costs. Some of the proposed lots for G1 are truly not realistic for the proposed goal of more affordable and workforce housing. The New Hampshire DOT estimates $3.9 million per mile to build sound walls. Most of the walls' costs are the foundation built to withstand collision and wind loads. Installing sound reduction windows also dramatically increases the cost of the build by as much as $500 or more per window. The Highway Noise District, which is Ordinance 10670, in case you're interested, may still not be able to be attained. Lots in the Highway Noise District will likely be at market value to offset all the costs they will have to meet. There are many residential choices which might be a better fit than a blanket of G1, such as G2, MRB, SRB, or leaving some of the lots as they are because they were rezoned and they made sense then and they make sense now. The understanding is by changing these zones, there can be density of housing and the ability to create small communities. Can you think of anyone who would want to live over or next to a restaurant that has the capacity for 50 to 250 people? How about a nightclub of 250 people or less? Both come with more traffic, more parking needs, and more noise. How about a restaurant of 50 people or less and no nightclubs without a special exception? If you think 50 people or less in a restaurant and no nightclubs would be acceptable, then changing most of these zones to G2 makes sense when they abut residential areas. The residential structures that are allowed in G1 and G2 are the same. The lot standards are based on the building types that are chosen. It has nothing to do with G1 or G2. Pretty much the difference between G1 and G2 is the uses. G1 has the more intense uses. Portsmouth normally reserves the lower number or the lower letter for the less intense uses, except in Gateway. Gateway 1 is the more intense use. Please approve or disapprove these zoning changes by the pages which were presented at the February Planning Board meeting. Review them carefully as what is next to them and what are all the streets. And if they are in the Highway Noise District, consider that they may not be affordable. Think about the traffic circle and think about the fact that some may be better off being business or research because they buffer residential property. Think about what you would want next to you if you're in a residential area. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. No more speakers, any on Zoom? None on Zoom. Okay, so we're going forth with the public hearing and vote on ordinances. This is the first reading of these ordinances, so there'll be second reading. First reading of ordinance amending Chapter 10 zoning ordinance, City of Portsmouth, zoning map be amended to change the zoning designation of the following parcels pursuant to Chapter 10, Article 4, zoning and district use regulations, Section 10.421, district location and boundaries, Section 10.421.10 of the zoning ordinance. That the zoning map be amended so that the described parcels within the ordinance are rezoned from office research to gateway neighborhood business.
Your Honor, I make a motion that we pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading for the April 15th, 2024 City Council meeting of the proposed zoning map amendments.
Second?
Any discussion? So this, for the discussion, the next opportunity, this is setting the public hearing. So folks like Elizabeth, who just spoke here this afternoon, can speak for an unlimited amount of time. Still 3 minutes is great, but that's what we have for the next ask. Councilor Morrow.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've been looking at for a long time, and the only reason why we are holding the second reading on April 15th instead of April 1st is due to notice requirements and the inability to get it noticed in time. So that's why we've requested the April 15th.
All right. And just to clarify, these went to the planning board.
Yes, correct.
And for the recommendation, and they've been recommended back by the planning board.
Yes.
As presented.
Yes.
But we will hold the public hearing, and we will discuss that at the April 15th. So, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Next up, public hearing, second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 7, Vehicles, Traffic, and Parking, Article 1, Parking Meters, Section 7.102, Parking Meter Zones and Parking Meter Rates. Do we have the, I can't remember if we had the proposal, if I just read it in the packet last time, or the presentation.
We do, Your Honor. We have Parking Director Ben Fletcher, who's here to give a brief verbal update. And before you on the dais, our proposed and current maps. Essentially, come on up, Ben, if you would. Changing and no longer delineating a Zone A and a Zone B downtown. It would eliminate Zone B, and everything on street would turn into Zone A.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor McEachern, City Manager Conard, and members of the council. Thanks for the opportunity to discuss this proposal with you this evening. Councilor Bagley has appropriately brought this measure forward due to information that comes from meetings with the surrounding the 2024 parking study currently underway. The proposal is supported by the updated 2024 version of the city's 2012 parking principles. Specifically in this case, the recommendation to price higher demand parking inventory to accommodate highly motivated users, as in quotes, with the idea that lower priced inventory would attract longer term stays and support the city's Park One's philosophy. To that end, by 2012, there were 3 price tiers established, Zone A in central downtown, Zone B further out, and the Hanover Garage. This practice coincides with basic economic principles, supply and demand principles, and follows the advice proffered in the widely accepted parking Bible, that being author Donald Shoup's book called The High Cost of Free Parking, which I know some of you are familiar with. Additionally, we added a 4th price tier in October 2018 when the Foundry facility opened. So over time, it's keenly observed that, and you have the maps, the heat maps to show it, that demand and resulting occupancy in profiles now show that pricing differences between zones A and B no longer have the intended effect of mitigating demand in highly desired areas such as the Bridge lot, the Worth lot, surrounding areas, even extending all the way up to Rains and Vaughn inventory. The heat maps provided show peak demands over the past calendar year, 2023, and clearly indicating that the current pricing between the 2 zones does not have the desired result of channeling demand effectively. This proposal would eliminate Zone B, then placing all of Portsmouth on-street and lot inventory under a single price profile matching Zone A, which remains $2 per hour for the first 3 hours and then $5 per hour thereafter. The idea being that this change would further encourage users to engage the garages for longer-term stays, reducing the on-street and lot demand and related congestion, which would lower the city's carbon footprint, encouraging users to adhere to the city's Park Once philosophy. Additional benefits would include a higher degree of walkability and enhanced bicycle safety to coincide with the reduced congestion. Concurrent with this proposal is a 25-cent reduction in the current resident rate available to registered residents using the Park Mobile app. This proposal does not affect pricing in either of the city's garages. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Any questions for Parking Director Ben Fletcher? Assistant Mayor.
Thank you. Ben, is there, what do we see anticipated for revenue increase based on this?
So I did an assessment that took a year's worth of actual transaction data and length of stay data. Under the current conditions, I do not assume a change in behavior, at least one that's going to be measurable. And the total that we came up with was, and again, this is speculation based on if behaviors change, this will change, but $569,000.
Thank you. And do you happen to know how many residents are enrolled for the resident discount, or what percentage of our users?
So the resident total count changes monthly.
Yep.
Because every 2 years they're asked to renew, because when people move in and out of the city, it's always wise to maintain these kind of roles. Otherwise, everybody in Kittery becomes a resident and you end up the victim of your own program, trying to help people out. So I can tell you that 4% is our general number over the past several years. The number has been challenged, and that's fine. When Park Mobile was only a few percents, a smaller percentage of our meter usage. So there are 3 meter types in the city. There's the small single-space meters, the IPS meters. There is the larger ones that have the keyboard when you walk up to them. That's a multi-space meter. And then there's Park Mobile, which is basically a global meter that covers everything. Park Mobile tends to cater to a younger crowd. Folks, they're less responsive to apps and using their phone for things, or getting off the road over time. And we're seeing an increase of the Park Mobile app over time that puts us in a place where in May of last year, Park Mobile surpassed the other 2 apps, or the other 2 meter types in revenue per transaction, because people will take advantage, that use this app, take advantage of the longer term stays, because it will remind them when you're running out of time, and so that avoids getting a citation, which is a very popular thing to do, is extend your time. And in May, I think that was February, in revenue per transaction in May of last year, now transactions total, and now the app is currently the number 1, but compared to the other 2 combined. So, but the 4% seems to hold. And over the last couple of election cycles, we have endeavored to visit all 5 of the city's voting wards with a table, and the voting wards have been generous with giving us space and opportunity to discuss with the local public that, hey, there's an opportunity for you to engage in less expensive parking if you do these few things, and that has resulted in a lot of increased enrollment in the app, but thankfully has not increased the usage by this particular user group. Now, remember, this is the one user group that we can help decide to take other modes of transportation. The ones that might walk in, the ones that might take scooters, because you have the advantage of parking one on a sidewalk close to a building as long as the wheelchair can get by for free, and the ones that might take bicycles and things like that. So it's very positive that this user group uses the multi-modes that are available, because we don't have an extensive mass transit system that serves the number 1 user of the parking system, and that's tourist traffic. And so we see that. I was interested to see the 4% hold, and it gets a little less in the summertime because you have this influx of tourists, and then towards the I'm giving you the winter figure, and it's about 3.9 to 4%, and it's been consistent over several years, even as the app has increased its usership. And so the argument bears it bears strongly that 4% is a good figure to think as to local usage, and I think that's a highly positive, because as a constituency that wants to lower the carbon footprint and reduce congestion, increase bicycle safety, things like that, then you would want fewer cars from folks that had other opportunities. As somebody from New York coming up with a family of 4 to enjoy the city, enjoy the leaves or whatever else might they enjoy in the state, the mass transit system is not going to help serve them well. So they're coming in those vehicles, whether we hope that's not the case or otherwise.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Just one brief one. It's still, we have to bring identification. Can you remind us how you sign up for the resident discount?
Right. So there's a couple of factors to this, and I'm actually good with this as a live free or die person, even though I'm new to the area, 6 years. But that we're not allowed to take photographs of these types of documents, of driver's license, things like that. So we require an in-person visit to show. What we're looking for is a driver's license with a Portsmouth address and a vehicle registration with a Portsmouth address and any of a number of following items, phone bill, electric bill, things like that, that show the same address and the same names. And that helps us make sure that we are offering this particular discount to people that actually do live here, spend their taxes here, and so on.
And I think I've asked this before, but is it possible we could refer to legal to have this automatic sign up when you register your car?
There is discussion. I don't think I'm in a position right now to talk details on this, but I think it's a good idea that would be part of the process. I also think it's a good idea that, parking outstanding citations should be cleared in this type of process. So there's a lot of discussion to be had. I think it's certainly possible. It would require some decision making by those that have a higher pay grade than me, to be fair.
Thanks, Ben.
Yes, sir.
Oh, Councilor Cook.
I just wanted to say thank you to the parking department and to the Parking Traffic and Safety Committee for their effort to reduce the rate for residents. That's very meaningful, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay, I think that, are there any further, now we got the public hearing. So we will open it up to public hearing speakers, 2 for or against the change in ordinance. Any speakers, 2 for or against? Seeing none on Zoom, I will close the public hearing. Any additional council questions, deliberations, or motion? Councilor Blaylock.
I'll just state that I encourage all downtown workers to use the Foundry Garage if they do have to travel to town with their cars, because that's the last group of people I'd like to see this affect. But I do know that they have the Foundry Garage there as a lower fee. They can park all day. So I just want to remind them of that.
Councilor Bagley.
Your Honor, I'll move to pass second reading and schedule third and final reading at the April 1st, 2024 City Council meeting to amend Chapter 7, Vehicles, Traffic, and Parking, Article 1, Parking Meters, Section 7.102, Parking Meter Zones and Parking Meter Rates, to remove the standard occupancy zone, Zone B, and increase the parking rate discount for residents using the Park Mobile app.
Second.
And I'll speak briefly to it. Everything Director Fletcher said, and it was a kind of a long, detailed explanation. I just wanted to highlight that it's not 4% of residents using the app. It's 4% of parkers using the app. The vast majority of the people that park downtown using the Park Mobile app, which is over 50% of transactions and 50% of revenue driven for on-street parking, are now using the app. So we have really good data there. What this does is 2 things. One, it increases the resident discount by 50%, so it's going to incentivize people to make that trip to Foundry Garage and get the discount. And 2, it's going to incentivize people to park, hopefully, more in the Foundry Garage, and that's going to do 2 things. One, it's going to open up spaces a little bit more readily. As you can see with the heat map, everywhere is over 100% now, We'd like to get that down to 85%. We probably won't do that with this, but we're moving the needle in the right direction. And that limits the congestion. So when you're going through town and you have to wait behind 5 cars because one person sees somebody get in their car and then waits for 60 seconds for that person to get in their car and pull out so they can have the spot. We're going to reduce that kind of congestion in town with this move. So we're saving residents money, and we're improving the traffic flow downtown and making it a more pedestrian-friendly environment, in my opinion. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Any other questions or comments from the council? Okay, no deliberation. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Your Honor, if I get a second, I would move to suspend the rules and pass third and final reading.
Second.
Any discussion? This is to suspend the rules. All in favor? Aye.
And just for all the reasons I just mentioned, not to mention that the current challenges we have with the ongoing construction at Foundry, I think the sooner we enact these changes, probably the better.
Do we have a motion to pass third and final reading?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Councilor Bagley. All right, City Manager.
Great. Item number 1, Your Honor, is a request for a work session regarding the disposition and future use for the South Meeting House. And the proposal is to request a work session in the hour before the April 15th City Council meeting. And what sparked this conversation was initially the relocation of the former tenant PPM TV to a different space that's better suited for them. And that brought on the request from the VFW recently to be considered for, to be the tenant, if you will, for that space. Staff feels strongly that what we should do is hear from the public and run a very public and transparent process as it relates to consideration for future uses of that building. And so we believe an appropriate first step would be to hold a work session to hear from all of the folks. We've heard from some anecdotally. We've, again, received the formal request from the VFW, but the idea to start that public conversation would be with a work session.
Any other? Oh, we first just need a motion.
Yes. Yes, I'd like to make a motion to schedule a work session on April 15th at 6 p.m. regarding the South Meeting House property.
Second.
I'm going to recuse myself from this vote and from participating in the work session as a city councilor, as commander of the VFW.
Thank you, Councilor Denton. Any other conversation or comments or questions?
I'll just mention one concern I've noticed repeatedly been brought up is the parking. So I would just hope if any tenant would go in there with parking be part of it, and obviously that's a big part of the discussion. But I know we've mentioned several uses, VFW, artists, archives, but they, yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. And because of Patriots Day, that is not tax day, right? It's April 16th for us, not April 15th.
We don't have Patriots Day here in New Hampshire.
Right, we don't.
But don't we send our taxes to Massachusetts?
We do.
And they're closed, so we get the extra day?
We might for tax purposes, but we plan to have a city council meeting that night.
Okay, I'm just wondering if it works. Well, work session isn't, okay.
We have a council meeting that night.
All right.
We have
I
a
got
full
to do
council
my
meeting that
taxes.
night.
No
We already
three-day
have a
weekend
second
for
reading.
Patriots Day. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think it might be important for the city council to actually see the building and see the interior of the building, see the current status of the building. So I was wondering if it's possible for the city manager to schedule a time when the council could come and see the building and see the condition it's in?
We could certainly do that. I think it would be appropriate to show the building in groups, smaller groups, although we don't have a quorum.
Yeah.
We can make that certainly available between now and April 15th.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook. Any other questions, comments? It's always disappointed when the Children's Museum left for Dover. We lost that. Almost had it on Dennett Street. But that Yellow Submarine lives on in Dover, so it's exciting. Look forward to the process. Understand we have had some emails on this. Councilor Denton's letter of intent as part of the VFW sparked a conversation, but the conversation will result in a work session, so look forward to that. So it's moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Number 2 is bringing forward the license agreement for Seacoast Eat Local Farmers Market for what will be the 28th season of the farmers market in the city, and I believe the 23rd here at the upper lot of City Hall. We are excited to work again with Seacoast Eat Local. They've been a great relatively new vendor. I believe this will be their second year. The request would be to operate the market here from May 4th, which is typically the first opening day, the first Saturday in May, and close a week earlier than normal through October 26th, 2024. And again, they've been a wonderful partner to work with, and we look forward to a successful season.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to execute the license agreement as presented, which is in substantially similar form as the license agreement from 2023, allowing Seacoast Eat Local to operate a farmers market at the municipal complex on Saturday mornings from May 4th, 2024 through October 26th, 2024, and that the city manager is further authorized to negotiate and execute any amendments to the agreement that she deems consistent with its purpose.
Second?
Any further discussion? Councilor Denton.
I do have a question, and just looking at this now, we normally run up until November, because I know we have the Pumpkin Smash, second to last. If you could speak to that.
I can. With the cold weather, the amount of vendors really drops off significantly. And I know that consideration for the cost of ensuring that fundraising event is something I know that the fundraisee would be considering. So this was a thoughtful request on the part of Seacoast Eat Local to end 1 week earlier than normal.
Thank you.
But we can still smash the pumpkins there if we so desire.
We will most likely, if that were to happen again, it would be on that October 26th date.
Okay.
Maybe before you're ready to give up your pumpkin.
Sorry, is this a matter of liability? City manager?
When and I'm staring at my colleague who is part of that nonprofit that holds the fundraiser. The cost to provide liability insurance went way, 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 way up. So I know that the group is considering whether to continue that as a fundraiser. But regardless, if it will continue on, it will be held that 1 week earlier on October 26th.
Okay, and wait, I guess I don't quite understand why it has to happen the week before.
Because there won't be a farmer's market on November 4th for people to come.
And it's usually the Saturday or before Halloween to raise money for the parade. So.
Sure, but I guess the question I have is if the fundraiser of the Pumpkin Smash so desires to have it outside of the after the farmers market is closed, if that's a big enough draw to have people come or not.
I guess in theory, yes. We could certainly discuss that with the Halloween nonprofit group.
Okay.
And they would just need insurance.
Correct. Okay. Any further questions, considerations? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
The third and final item this evening is a request for authorization of the disbursement of $2,350 from the Trust for Administrative Costs to support the efforts internally, administratively, to run the first-time homebuyer program. And I should mention our Community Development Director, Elisa Nunziata, is on Zoom if we have any specific questions. The request is to seek the council's clear authority to expend trust monies on staff salary costs to administer this program. It's quite labor intensive. We are really excited to support it, and the thought was now that the servicing has been brought in-house and is no longer managed by an outside lending bank, the request is that for the remainder of this fiscal year, 1.25% of the Community Development Director and the Community Development Assistant Administrative Assistant salaries be considered as an administrative charge, which gets to that amount of $2,350. It allows for them both to charge their time as it relates to processing first-time homebuyer applications.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to disperse $2,350 from the Portsmouth Housing Endowment Fund to be expended in fiscal year 24 on community development staff and salary benefits associated with administering the city's first-time home buyer loan program.
Second. Any discussion? Councilor Cook.
I just have a question on this. Do we see an uptick at all in applications for this program, or how are we trending?
That's a great question. Elise, if you're able to chime in right now, that would be great. There she is.
Hello. Can
Hi
you
there.
see me or hear me?
Yes and yes.
Or here. Hello. Thank you very much, and good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am happy to report that after some year or and a half or 2 years of very slow time, we are seeing an uptick in the program. So we have 2 applicants currently. We have one hoping to close at the end of this month, and another one in active application mode. So that is a great thing. So that's where we are at this moment. It could certainly increase before the end of the fiscal year.
Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, and I think it's worth noting that the newly formed Blue Ribbon Committee, Housing Committee, is looking at updating and working with the city manager and staff on the first-time home buyer program and making sure that it is obtainable to people, given kind of the status of our market and the income levels, and really working with some of the people, including John O'Leary, who's one of our committee members, who was one of the founding members of this program. So making sure it's updated so that more residents have access to it.
That's great. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you. Thank you, Elise. Good night.
Thank you, Elise.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the consent agenda.
Yeah, I would move we adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, email correspondence.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to accept and place on file.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, we have a letter from Chris Madden, Portsmouth Maritime Folk Festival, requesting the following: use of spaces in Prescott Park on Saturday, September 28th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., and Sunday, September 29th, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Use of space in front of North Church, and motorcycle parking ban in Market Square on Sunday, September 29th, and some parking passes for their performers and volunteers.
Your Honor, I move to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
Second.
Any discussion? Assistant Mayor.
Yes. Question, if city manager, maybe you know this, maybe you don't off the top of your head, have the motorcycle parking ban, is that something we've done before for the Maritime Festival?
Not recently, but I am told yes. In the past, we have.
Do we know, I guess I may be looking up there, when in the past? Are we talking pre-COVID? Are we talking 10 years ago?
Anyone in the back know? I don't know off the top of my head. I can certainly find that out and report back.
Peter drew the short straw on this one.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Peter Rice, Director of Public Works. In the past, we've set aside area that they'd be playing to make sure the motorcycles would not park in that area. So it's for a while it was on the Breaking New Ground side, and then it was on the South Church side. So we just made sure we cordoned off the areas and made it clear that motorcycles could not be parking in those areas during that time.
Okay, so much like we do with some events, it's just no parking in general in those areas?
Yeah, it was specific to motorcycles at the time. So
It wasn't an outright ban, though. It was a redirection.
it was a redirection, yeah, just so they wouldn't be right next to the music.
Okay, and so we assume that this would be a redirection also?
Correct.
Okay. And then have we, I feel like this has come up before with people asking for parking passes for events in the square, and if I could be wrong, I feel like we don't normally do this.
Correct.
So I guess I would motion, would I guess ask that we follow kind of the normal precedent that we do when we're referring this to you. I just want to make sure that we're not, again, we have a lot of nonprofits do a lot of great work and a lot of festivals that are put on in town, and I want to make sure we're setting a precedent that we're not just giving away parking spaces and also as an obnoxious motorcycle driver, not making sure we're not banning parking for them, just making sure we're relocating to other allocated.
We appreciate that
spots.
distinction. We'll bring that forward as part of the logistics meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
Counselor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question for the city manager around the Prescott Park Arts Festival contract, and if this date actually falls outside that contractual
Correct.
timeframe?
It does.
Any other questions? Will not hold it against them that they did not sing in front of us this time. Still pretty impressive. All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next, a letter from Russ Grazier of PMAC requesting permission to hold a one-time small parade for Jazz Appreciation Month on Friday, April 12th, 2024 at 12 p.m.
I move to refer this to the city manager with the authority to act.
Second?
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, a letter from Craig Welch, Executive Director of Portsmouth Housing Authority, requesting a letter of support to accompany their request for congressionally directed spending funds from our congressional delegation for potential workforce housing at the Sherburne School property.
Your Honor, I would move to recommend and authorize the mayor to send a letter on behalf of the city council.
You're now second for the point of discussion.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. We had some public speakers about this tonight. We've had quite a lot of discussion over the past 2 years, or 3 years now. I would support us sending this letter. I think, personally speaking, as a counselor, I think the Sherburne School, we can't get shovels in the ground soon enough. I think it needs to be reduced in scale and scope from what was originally presented. But I wouldn't want to leave federal dollars on the table by not sending a letter.
Your Honor.
Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do have a little concern about this not going through at least conversations at the Blue Ribbon Committee, and I'm also concerned with the. I would be more supportive of this if it didn't directly say the Sherburne School property, as we have no signed contract for the PHA. We have no land lease agreement. And so I feel as those are the steps that we're looking to complete in the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee. And so I'm concerned about sending a letter in support of the development with PHA at Sherburne School before we have those things at least inked and work through a little bit in the Housing Committee. I mean, we have invited PHA to speak at the Housing Committee on Thursday. So I feel that I would be doing a disjustice to those committee members to not be able to have a conversation with PHA with them before signing this letter. And I do understand through the program that there is the deadline of March 22nd, and that's the federal deadline for the delegation to submit any spending of them. I do also think, diving deeper into this program, that I think there could have been, whether through the city or through Rockingham County Commission, some other state and county programs that could have benefited from this. There's a lot of transportation projects that could have, we could have brought forward to our congressional delegation to ask for some money, especially in airport zones, especially around public transportation. But given what I said prior, I just don't feel comfortable sending a letter to our delegation before even having a chance to have a conversation with the Housing Committee on this.
Councilor Dutton.
So it's been over a decade since I've been a congressional staffer at the district office, but just looking at the request here, I really can't even tell what it's asking. At one point, and it's only 3 sentences or so long, but it's asking us to request an allocation of community project funding without a specified amount, and then later on, it asks us to send a letter of support to accompany this request. So it's asking us to send 2 things without a specified amount. I definitely want to take full advantage of any community project funding out there, but sending this letter March 13th, saying there's a deadline of March 22nd without any more clear details, I don't know what our letter would even say if we were to send one.
Council Boyle.
Thank you, Your Honor. I watched the Housing Blue Ribbon Committee their last meeting. I was glad to see some nice discussion there, but I would like to see this come from that committee, if that is their recommendation. I know there's some members of the Panaway Manor or Sherburne neighborhood on the committee. I mean, personally, I'm a neighbor of the Sherburne School, but I think our neighborhood would like to see the process play out in the Blue Ribbon Committee so that it plays out properly and isn't rushed by just a simple letter from the PHA. Yeah.
Council Morrow.
Might I suggest that maybe the co-chairs of the Housing Committee could have a rough draft for the Housing Committee to review at its meeting on Thursday, and if there is support and a vote to move forward with that, it would still be in time with whatever changes that committee might make.
So should we amend the motion?
I could amend the motion
To approve based on approval of the Blue Ribbon?
that the,
You would want to send it to the Blue Ribbon Committee with the authority to act.
that's so moved.
If the second agrees.
You are the second.
Who was the second?
Me. Yeah.
Assistant Mayor. We're moving this to the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee with authority to act in anticipation of a draft from the PHA of what the contents of this would be.
I guess more, I was thinking that you guys would draft something and that it could be discussed at the meeting, and since PHA would be there, we could discuss it with them.
That's our letter.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me amend that then. Refer to the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee with authority to act and create a draft letter.
So, sorry, the draft letter would have, so who's creating the draft letter? It's
the committee.
So,
It was my idea that the co-chairs would come up with a draft that then the committee could discuss, revise, and approve.
okay.
All right.
I guess I struggle with that because, again, I don't know what PHA is looking for. And I struggle to, I don't know what to draft in the letter besides what they said. So I would more lean, I'm not sure the best way to.
All right, Counselor Cook, and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was just going to note that there's nothing that we do that is going to stop the Portsmouth Housing Authority from sending
Yes.
a letter and putting in place this request.
Correct.
So it is not unreasonable just to ask the Portsmouth Housing Authority for their letter so that we know exactly what they're requesting in advance of the housing meeting on Thursday night, so that whatever is drafted can automatically reflect that, and then the committee can debate appropriately.
Thank you. That's the missing step, Councilor Cook.
Yeah.
Councilor Bullock?
If I remember correctly, the Sherburne School is on the agenda for the next Housing Committee.
Correct,
meeting,
and,
right?
and PHA is coming to not necessarily discuss details of any type of proposal, but to discuss, there were members of the committee who had questions just generally about PHA, and as non-representatives of PHA, we felt that we wanted to allow their board of directors to come in and explain more in depth to and answer questions of the committee members.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make it clear that the Housing Committee, I watched the last meeting. I saw that the intent of the next meeting was to focus on Sherburne. So that was already the plan of the Blue Ribbon Committee. But I would hope the Blue Ribbon Committee would keep moving forward with their plan. Yeah.
Kelly, do you want to read the motion that we?
So you can read it tomorrow.
Well, your amended motion was to send a letter to the to send a letter by the Housing Blue Ribbon Committee to authorize them to act. And then there was discussion. So Councilor Cook said that nothing, I think what you're going to do is have a letter drafted by PHA to come back to the Housing Committee to look at before they send off.
So we need to,
So-
we need to request the letter. We need to request a copy of PHA's letter to present to the Blue Ribbon Housing
But
Committee.
the letter that we'll be authorizing to send will be our letter.
Correct.
So,
And it may come after this deadline, just.
well, I would say that the deadline from a standpoint, well, Councilor Denton, and then I'll pass the gavel.
You actually just answered my question. The letter would then be coming from the Blue Ribbon Committee because they're going to have final say, it's not coming back to us, or would the letter be essentially on our names underneath, although we didn't review the final letter? Obviously, the congressional delegation likely prefer the latter, but I'm less comfortable with the latter.
Okay, Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think it might be important for the council to give some direction here for the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee, if we're asking them to draft a letter on our behalf.
Okay. I think, so I don't want to get so complicated that the letter of intent, and Councilor Bagley, maybe you have the answer. I'll pass the gavel.
Just a quick Parliament legal inquiry. Can we draft a letter and send it somewhat in these things, but it wouldn't be legally binding. It would just be a position at this time the council would be interested in supporting federal dollars towards a project at the Sherburne School.
That's my understanding of what they're requesting is, and it's not legally binding, and it doesn't presuppose final action at the Sherburne School, but it is a request to support their request that will allow the process to start.
And my follow-up to that would be, and I watched the Housing Committee meeting, and I'm excited that they're going to put Sherburne for the next agenda. But we did sit here and hear the report back out from Portsmouth Listens, and over again, every single group said, how many more committees do we need? How many more studies do we need? When are we going to actually do something? And here's a chance to do something. And it's non-binding.
Yes, Your Honor.
I think that while I understand the desire to make sure that it doesn't feel as though the process is not going to be completed, and that there's a process that is going to be completed. Heard Manny talk about Eric, who was here earlier, spoke to it, and he's on the committee, being able to move forward with something at the Sherburne site. The reason we sold Community Campus, now this is with Mayor Beckstead, when I was in Councilor Tabor's position, was the belief that we would have affordable housing there. That was a big reason why we decided to move and cut the idea of trying to rehab the Lister or Sherburne School for the Lister Academy, could move that out to Community Campus and look at this opportunity to create below market rate affordable housing. What I see here is an opportunity to get federal money, not Portsmouth taxpayer money, federal, well, I guess as a portion of our, we punch above our weight in terms of congressional spending. But to have federally earmarked money for a project like this is very important. So while I understand the need to have the language very specific and understand exactly what it is, what I do support is the ability for PHA to try to get as much federally funding as is possible in order to make a project successful without a lot of trade-offs, and to make the project more in line with what the community may want. So to that end, I would suggest that we try to keep the language of the letter broad. This, for the stance of, the city of Portsmouth supports the effort of PHA to acquire federal funds for the purpose of the Sherburne School. I don't believe that there's any legally binding nature, nor would I expect there to be any requirement for the Sherburne School to be selected, but making sure, and to speak to the point of whether or not this was well planned out or not, I wish we had as many people looking at grants across the entire ecosystem of grants and existing there. I would love that. And I fear when I hear a grant, it's like, oh, what other ones could we possibly miss? But we don't have a staff of like enormous like research and grant writers that are looking. They do a fantastic job, but to say that there is some congressional spending that, we rely on a delegation. So I would like to keep the letter short and to be able to act on that if it's to be reviewed by, the Housing Committee.
Councilor Morrell, sorry, I forgot it. I had it. Maybe we should send two. Maybe there should be from the whole council a general letter of just support for workforce housing at that site, whatever the case of the letter, whatever, project comes up. Obviously, we are not legally bound. And then maybe if there's a want of the housing committee to do something with more detail or more directed, they could do their own letter, and then we don't have to worry about what the full council is approving. Okay. Suggestion. Blaylock?
Thank you. I am all for, I know we need workforce housing in Portsmouth. I'm all for using federal dollars. I just afraid my neighbors are afraid that the PHA is driving this, and I'm going to support them and support the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee, and hope that process plays out. But just if I vote against this, I'm just trying to support the process of the Blue Housing Ribbon Committee and the fact that my neighbors feel more comfortable with that.
Thank you. Councilor Tabor?
Yeah, I think I also feel the urgency, but I have to share Councilor Denton's view that the very brief letter we have from PHA does not tell us what we're supporting. And I like the idea of referring to the Housing Committee with authority to act so that we have time to get some eyes on what it is they're asking us to support. Because from this very short letter, I can't really tell. So we can vote for the idea of housing at Sherburne, but we're asked to support a grant application of which I have no idea what it is. Maybe I'm the only person that feels that way.
Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. Perhaps, I don't know if the city manager has any insight. My concern is if we don't send the letter, if we take our time, this grant opportunity goes away, and we don't have a second chance at it.
So it's a federal program, and we don't know when funding is going to end for this program. And so the deadline for our delegates for this staunch is for the applications. It's March 22nd. But based on what I've read online about this program, which covers, again, a multitude of things, we don't know when it's going to end.
Can I speak to that? We have been successful in previous federal fiscal years in obtaining congressionally directed spending dollars through this program. And for the record, the city plans to put forth two asks in this round. One is related to law enforcement and the police department. And the big ask of the city will be relative to supporting the Mechanic Street pump station. In past years, we've put out several smaller requests. We're putting out one large request this year to support that pump station need. There are at least 3 nonprofits that I know of that have asked for letters of support from the city that are going for projects on their own property. That is something we typically do for one another, and that's fine. But the nuance here is obviously PHA looking for approval on city-owned property. And to echo the point, we don't know what it is they're putting in for the grant request. Perhaps that could be something the Blue Ribbon Committee formally requests or asks to see.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Do you want this back?
No.
No. Okay. Councilor Cook?
Thank you. Because this is a common practice that a nonprofit would request a letter of support from the city and in this case, the unique situation is that we happen to own the property. But as the mayor has stated, I don't like the idea of leaving funding on the table, especially when it comes to affordable housing options. I don't see the harm in the council sending a support letter for the Portsmouth Housing Authority in this case.
Okay, no, okay. You first.
So, in the vein of wanting to include the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee, I think that we can solve this by sending a letter of support in saying we support the application of the PHA to the Housing Committee. They will receive they will speak to that application hopefully at Thursday and vote and give them the authority to act on behalf of a letter of support, which they can better attest to. So we would just, a very simple letter that says we support an application, or we support the application or the request of federal funding as contemplated by PHA, something that sounds better and more enticing than that. And then we would share that with the Housing Committee with the authority to act, and the Housing Committee could decide whether or not to send the letter based on their conversation with the PHA and the application that they would receive at that time.
Okay.
Okay.
Second agrees, first agrees. Any,
Willing to modify the motion to that effect?
okay.
So sending a letter, it would be sending a letter of support to the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee with the authority to act.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Yep.
One opposed? Okay. Take that.
Passing the gavel back. All right. I will we'll take a 10-minute recess. I guess I don't need to vote on that. All right. Welcome back. We are on to the council agenda. Under my name, appointments to be considered, no vote tonight. Reappointment of Samantha Collins to the Conservation Commission, reappointment of Kathleen Bergeron to the Portsmouth Housing Authority, reappointment of Catherine Lynch to the Recreation Board for next meeting's consideration.
Your Honor, if I might, I'd like to propose a motion to suspend the rules to put an item that's not on the agenda under my name. If I get a second.
Second.
Vote.
Yep. Oh, yep.
To
All in
suspend
favor?
rules.
Aye.
The item under my name concerns the litigation with Redgate Kane. As we know, there's a lawsuit in process, and I feel that I need to make a disclosure. During the lawsuit discovery process, an email emerged in which I advised a friend after a McIntyre conversation, quote, best to delete all the McIntyre jottings in case of subpoenas, because the developer, who is very litigious, might find them. I want to disclose this because it was an error in judgment on my part. Even though there was no litigation underway at the time, there's an extra layer of complication in this matter because this friend had just become a volunteer on a city committee. For my own part, it's my absolute belief that I never deleted or destroyed any of my own emails, my texts, my social media posts, or printed documents about McIntyre, because I knew that deleting any of these would be worse than keeping them. But I erred in what I advised my friend to do, and for that I apologize to my friend, my fellow counselors, and to the public. I only learned about this last Monday, and I'm disclosing it as quickly as I can in the interest of transparency. I think transparency counts the most when we as elected officials have to acknowledge mistakes. And finally, upon the advice of the city attorney in this matter, I hired my own counsel, and we've confirmed that every piece of correspondence between me and others concerning McIntyre has been produced in discovery, and I'm willing to prove that by submitting to a forensic audit on all my devices, email, and other correspondence. So that is what I want to disclose tonight.
Councilor Tabor, while we are assured by your representation that you did not delete any emails related to the McIntyre project, we will have the forensic review conducted by that qualified expert on all of your devices to confirm, as you've stated, that no emails were deleted.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to move to request a report back to the council by May the 6th on federal and state grant programs in historic districts and the impact of not following certified local government National Park Service guidelines and state guidelines in historic districts on grant eligibility, including eligibility for sustainability grants addressing sea level rise and preservation of historic structures and neighborhoods.
Second.
The reason I'm bringing this up at this stage is that I've had a little bit of concern around the process that we're proceeding down to discuss the Historic District Commission and their review of solar panels. And my concern is that I don't know that the council has all the information we need to make a decision that does not inadvertently harm the city and the city's ability to apply for grant funding, or the ability of residents to apply for taxpayer relief because they're in a preservation district. And I wanted to highlight this very specifically around some work that the city has done. In fact, we did a study called the Historic Resources Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment and Adaptation Plan that was funded by the National Park Service under the Hurricane Sandy Pre-Disaster Mitigation Grant Program and the State of New Hampshire Division of Historic Resources Program. And in that study, we were looking specifically at preparing Portsmouth's historic district for sea level rise, and how do we address that? Some of the recommendations that came out of that study included one that said very clearly that we had to maintaining, that it was important to maintain the integrity of historic properties. Maintaining the integrity of historic properties is important in maintaining Portsmouth's National Historic Landmark District designation, which ensures protection through the National Historic Preservation Act and makes historic property owners eligible for state and federal rehabilitation tax credits. And under that guideline, minor changes to a homeowner's property can negatively impact their ability to stay within the National Register. And the Downtown Historic Register District is actually quite large. It includes a huge portion of the south end, parts of the north end, all the way into Richards Avenue. But they said clearly that one issue to keep in mind when considering regulatory standards for historic structures is the unintended consequences of altering a structure to a degree that it would likely be considered ineligible for the National Register of Historic Places. In effect, houses can be removed and properties can be removed from that register status, therefore losing federal rehabilitation tax credits and also damaging the integrity of the zone, which also could potentially impact the city's ability to apply for future grant funding for those districts, many of whom are highly impacted by sea level rise, which is another issue around sustainability and climate. So I just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and that we get an adequate report back and that we understand the implications of making changes to our historic district rules and how that impacts us when it comes to all of these federal grants within these historic register districts.
We'll go, I saw the assistant mayor and then Councilor Blaylock and then Councilor Bagley. Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Cook, have you had any conversations or brought any of these concerns to the, I don't know if they have a working group, or at least I know that we saw both chairpersons here from the HDC and the planning board?
I have expressed my concerns to the chair of the Historic District Commission, and I believe that they're still in discussions around this. And so what I'm waiting for is their report back, but also I want to make sure that I hear from the city on what these preservation standards are. So much of this work was done with our current planning sustainability director sitting on these committees. So we have staff in-house that have been directly involved in these processes and should be able to report back on all of these federal grant programs. But also I should note that Portsmouth Advocates has also spoken a little bit to concerns around this at the Historic District Commission. And I've heard that there are still several concerns around the impacts of grant funding and also the impact of the integrity of these districts and how that could, in the long run, not benefit the city. Thank you.
Councilor Buck.
Thank you.
Councilor Bagley.
We never actually announced that we became a certified local government, and it was due to the work by the planning board. So that is a positive thing. It's a great thing for the city of Portsmouth, and it has been through the work of, our preservation. I have spoken with Portsmouth Advocates and Historic Society. I also am on the Historic District Commission, so I've done a lot of research into this. I've contacted the National Park Service. They stated as long as solar panels are not changing the architecture of a building, then they are pro-solar panel. They would never take away any opportunity for a grant. Our certified local government, they would not take that away because we were trying to fight climate change. They are all for preservation. They support putting solar panels on historic buildings as long as it's not permanently altering the building, like Councilor Cook just said, or it's not making an irrevocable change, which is part of the argument that's been made that solar panels do not change the structure. They're simply removed. It's simply like removing a wall, a painting from a wall. You remove the painting, it is no longer part of the wall. You cover up the little hole, and it never happened. So I'm glad that Councilor Cook brought this up because we haven't announced to the public that we are a certified local government. But I do wish she'd discuss this a little bit with me, just because I've been in touch with the National Park Service. I've been working on this on the Historic District Commission. And I've been in touch with the Portsmouth Advocates from the Portsmouth Historical Society. But yeah, we are going to be eligible for a bunch of grants for housing and other preservation and other climate change. So that is very exciting that we are be eligible for more grants.
Well, we all know about it now. Great. Councillor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a comment and then first maybe a question for the city manager. We typically don't put dates for report backs because trying to be considerate of staff time, and this does seem like at least to me, kind of a intensive request. In your opinion, is this feasible?
I will speak with staff. I think the idea would be to get an answer for the 6th. I know the 6th is the date by which the HDC and planning expect to have something back to the council.
Great, thank you. And
When is our work session again? Oh, sorry, when's our first reading? Is it the 6th?
May 6th.
And then my comment is, I did watch the most recent HDC work session, and I think to Councilor Blaylock's point, it did seem that, for asphalt roofs, solar panels make a lot of sense. For slate roofs, they don't make any sense at all. And there was some ambiguity about wood shingled roofs. But I think the idea was making modifications to a building that wouldn't permanently alter this structure. Certainly seems to be in the spirit of these types of grants.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to clarify that I'm not opposed to solar panels, but my concern is that we're following the guidelines that we need to follow in order to maintain the status that we have, specifically in our areas that, like the downtown district, and that there are guidelines. Actually, the National Park Service has guidelines around solar and sustainability measures within these historic districts. And so I want to make sure that in choosing to not follow their guidelines, but following our own instead, we don't somehow forego grant opportunities. So that's all I'm asking. It's not that I understand that there are guidelines, and the National Park Service has very clear guidelines around this, but we're not changing our ordinance to follow the National Park Service guidelines. We're changing our ordinance to not follow any of those guidelines. So I want to make sure that that does not hamper our ability to apply for grants in the future.
Councillor Denton.
Just wanted to thank Councillor Cook and simply point out that the use of Hurricane Sandy grants that were used to fund the study which showed which land would be the first land lost in the South End. It's very fitting to be part of the conversation to allow, in my opinion, property owners to put solar on their house if it's something they want to do to their property to help mitigate climate change.
All right, so we have a motion, seconded, discussion, report back. Seems like it's potentially reasonable. Are we okay with we don't typically put dates, but this is to support the first reading. All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Councillor Cook, back to you.
I'm going to go ahead and move to request a report back on the needs assessment process for the proposed police facility in advance of the work session of the council with the committee. If I get a second, I'll speak to that.
And I'll second that for discussion.
I think, I have expressed concerns over the past few months about the police facility proposal, and most of my concerns are around the fact that I haven't seen the needs assessment that was done, and so it's not really clear to me what the real request is and what the absolute needs are for the facility, and I want to make sure the council is getting that right. So I just want to ask for a report back so that the council can see the needs assessment that was done and understand the process for that before we take further action.
Is there a second?
I did second it.
Oh, you did say. All right, Councillor Denton, great.
Have we scheduled that work session? I honestly don't know.
No, we have not.
Okay, thank you.
The understanding is that the working group that is comprised of staff, the consultants, folks from the police department, they're working to outline what they're finding through the current process. We are working with the consultant to articulate what work has been done to date and why it's been done in the way that it has. So we will get that. We will have that available. I don't have a date for you though, but I can tell you that the idea was to come back to the council with more information in the April timeframe. That is still aspirational. I think we're still shooting for April.
Thank you.
Assistant Mayor.
Your Honor, Councilor Cook, just a point of clarification. So when you say the needs assessment, you're talking about more detail than the space needs assessment?
I'm wanting to know, because I wasn't part of that process, how was the needs assessment conducted and what did
Okay.
they decide, like, what was the final assessment done? Like, where is the document that says this is what we've outlined as needs?
Okay. Okay.
Councilor Tabor.
The square footage for each of the program areas is online. I think it would be helpful to know the questions that were asked and the surveys that were filled out to get that.
Okay.
Your Honor, if it would help this conversation, we could move forward the city manager information item, verbal update on where we stand with the police facility. Would that be appropriate at this time?
I think it certainly can be, but I want to make sure from just the process standpoint, it seems like we have the needs assessment for the space needs online, like this is the needs that are online. I think the Councilor Cook is questioning the process that went into identifying those space needs as requirements per those programs. So if that can be, I think the reasonable time to have that report back would be for a discussion. So if we can include that in as long as that's not an enormous lift, and I would imagine that this would be a part of the work that they've already done and have to categorize that other than information that's being uncovered. If we can have that discussion as the work session to understand each of those, and then by us understanding each of those, the public will understand each of those, how we got to the number on the space needs. But certainly, I think we can bring up the conversation on your verbal update. Do we have to motion to that, or can you just take that out of order?
We have a motion on the table right now.
We do, yeah.
We can get to it in the
All
normal
right.
course of business.
Okay. Any other conversation on this questions? So the request is to have the process.
Right, to understand the needs assessment process so that we can better meet the needs of the police department in a new police facility. It's hard when you just have a number. It's not really clear what goes into that, and so you have a square footage number, but it's very hard, I think, from my position to understand what was done to get to that number and what are the actual needs there of the police department.
Yep, and I would imagine that those will be clear. I also know that when it's a larger ticket item, we have to share that information as much as we can with the public, and while it might be repetitive to the committee, unfortunately, it has to be repetitive to the committee, so it's better explained to us and the public vis-a-vis us. So this is for a report back a request to report back the needs assessment process, the police facility in advance of the work session, the council with the committee. All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Did you have?
Your Honor, I was going to make a motion to suspend the rules and bring up the city manager's
All right.
informational item.
Second.
Number 6.
Number 6.
Can I get a second?
Second.
After that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. City manager, informational item. For those on YouTube who just want to watch the police section update, this will be that.
So we have
Time-stamped.
We have 3 members of the staff that attend every working group meeting, and 2 of them are here tonight, Deputy City Manager Suzanne Woodland and Director of Public Works Peter Rice. Looks like they're going to tag team this.
No short straw there.
They're racing.
Yeah. Charging to the microphone.
Good evening. Peter Rice, Director of Public Works. To bring you up to date in terms of where we're at, as you know, we've been meeting on a regular basis to refine the square footage of usage which people often refer to as a space needs analysis. The challenge, there's a little confusion sometimes when I hear the word the needs assessment, which in my mind was documenting the need for the upgrade of the facility and and the limitations of the existing space that they're in relative to the ability to upgrade those spaces, and why either a new building or an addition to this existing area, the existing building, was appropriate. So that is the need assessment relative to the physical space that's there now and the difficulties associated with that, versus the space they need based on the programming to do their job. So when you look at building a police station or a library or anything that has a programming component to it, there are adjacencies for activities for the various divisions of the department, that there's a need to be beside each other or within easy proximity relative to be able to do the project, to do the work that they do. So oftentimes what happens is they'll say, okay, in 20 years from now, we're going to have X number of staff, we anticipate the need, and a raw space for just that group is going to be this. Ignoring adjacencies, ignoring locations. So the initial numbers that come out are oftentimes much larger, and it's an iterative process that we go through. And a lot of this has been done through the working group. A lot of this we've brought forward steps along the way that provide more information to the public and to the council, because we wanted to make sure you understood the process we're going through. We've continued to work to improve the adjacencies and the efficiencies by having various groups next to each other, and how you improve the efficiencies of the space. And by doing that, we continue to reduce the square footage requirement. And now that we're looking at reusing portions of the existing space, we're able to instead of having a complete cost per square foot on an order of magnitude of $900 to $1,000 a square foot for new space, we're more in the $600 for renovation, and maybe even less depending upon the level of renovation. So that allows us to play with the layout of the building to make sure that the adjacencies work for the operations, and that we're maximizing the resource, or minimizing the demand for costs associated with supplying money to do the work, but at the same time making sure we ensure the best value for the residents, but also having a functional, highly functional police station. So we are continuing to work with the consultants to refine that, and it's important to realize that the structure of the team was set up in a way that we have a little bit of dialectic, where you have one group that's pushing for advocacy for what the police station needs, and the other group within that to make sure we're doing the best we can and to get the prices down. So this is a constant, we want this, well, justify that. How do you do it? Can you do it with less? So it's a constant back and forth to right-size the facility before we go to the final process or final number that's going to be there. So we've significantly reduced the footprint from what was originally asked for. We anticipate that we will continue to refine that number, and we will try to get as much of it into the older portion of the building as possible, thereby able to utilize the monies that have been invested in that space and stretch the dollar that much more. Things to look forward to are going to really be, massing. What's the layout going to look like? How's it going to interact with the site here? We're looking at building an addition out to the front. And it's important to realize that you have pedestrian traffic, you have vehicular traffic, you have sight lines, and things that people are going to feel strongly about relative to how they're currently interacting with the space and where they want to go in the future. So those are the types of things that, once we get to the point where we feel like we've really squeezed as much as we can in terms of sizing, we're going to need to be thinking about that as well. And that'll have an impact on the sizing, because it may be, well, that's great, we want to do this, but we want a pedestrian path in that area, so you need to adjust a little bit. So it's important to realize that this is a process. It's not like fixed in time, and until we get to the point where we're going to bid and we have 60% design and things like that, you're not going to have a real firm number yet. So, Suzanne, is there more you'd like to add?
Let me just add, because it may have been me who represented that I thought we could come back to you in the middle of April with a work session. And as Peter, I thought, very excellently explained how it's a dynamic process and there is some tension. Good tension is the kind of tension you want to kind of say, well, wait a minute, how come? Couldn't you do this? Couldn't you do that? And so that process is still ongoing. And as Peter just indicated, before we come back to you, we want to tease out squeeze first a little more. How much can we get in the existing section and not lose sort of the adjacencies that we're looking for with a modern police station? But also, as we were starting to kind of block things out a little bit, realizing all the site impacts, like pedestrians who come up the hill. And so, okay, well, does that change how we might think about where you bring in people who've been arrested? And so it's kind of looking at all of those pieces, and we wanted to be able to do a little bit more of that work before we come back to you. And I have to say, every meeting I feel like we make a little progress. You know, things get a little tighter. You know, we've looked at something a little differently. You know, turn this. Can we split that? You know, who's going to get the window? Kind of just, I mean, we aren't quite at that level of detail, but, you know, where are those who are actually going to be in the office all day, need more daylight versus it's a storage closet kind of space. So really looking at all of that, and it's just taking time. And so really that's what we're looking for, and that's why we're thinking it's more likely May that we'd be coming back with a work session, because we feel like we really need to do more work because we are getting there. And just to reemphasize, I know we've said this again, and Peter just said it again tonight, it is a process. And there's the ask, and then there's the where you wind up. And we've just been showing you a lot more of how the sausage gets made. And that's part of what's going on here. And I will say, we've kind of flagged it before, part of the challenge we have with the existing space is some of the structural components that we just inherited in terms of where the columns are and other elements like that. And that is part of the driver of the space needs, because it's hard to rework portions of that space for the current needs because of the existing infrastructure. And once you start moving or trying to move some of those columns, that's where you'll recall, because we had a lot of pressure to, can't you just redo it here? There's only so much you can retrofit and fix up and renovate there because of some of the structural pieces that once you touch them, you know, you're much better just, okay, that's in the new section. So does that cover some of the pieces? Yeah.
If there are any questions specific that, you know, we'd love to, you know, to answer them as best we can.
Any questions? I think that was a pretty exhaustive update. Thank you for that, and we look forward to scheduling that working group session when the time is appropriate, and we will have further discussion on that needs assessment there as well. And if we think those are two separate meetings that we need to have, happy to have more meetings than less on the police.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Next up, Councillor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. From the last PTS meeting, we have action items needing approval by the City Council. The first one is the Market Square bus bay parking. We voted to change the two 15-minute spaces in the bus bay to Zone A spaces, and I moved to change the two 15-minute spaces in the bus bay to Zone A spaces. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Yes, second.
I guess they wouldn't be Zone A anymore because they're we eliminated that, and it'd just be regular parking. What happened is during the pointing of the building on High Street, we lost three 15-minute parking spaces, so we moved two of them to this location. that pointing of the building is over with. So we now have 7 15-minute parking spaces all condensed in a very small area. So that what this would do is take those 4 spaces and make them all regular parking spaces instead of 15-minute spaces. And probably we'd have to change it back in a few months' time when more construction happens there, but we didn't think it made sense to have that many 15-minute spaces because they're underutilized in such a small area of town.
Great. Just a quick question on that. The signage for those, are we planning on slightly improving those? Because it's a little further for the, there was no sign, I think, previously on the ones that are closest to the, the actual tree or whatever.
Right, Your Honor, I've spoken to Eric Eby about that, and the idea will be that the signage is consistent and clearer and more visible.
Great. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
And second, Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the action sheet and minutes of the March 7th, 2024 Parking Traffic and Safety Committee meeting.
Second.
And I wasn't actually at this meeting, but Steve Pesci did a wonderful job as chair. I don't think there was anything too contentious. The Woodbury speed bumps got referred back to the city to have them bring back a plan to us. So nothing was finalized there, but we'll be hearing back from the city in the future.
So on that, just a clarification, there was 2 options before the PTS previously, right? There was one that had the speed cushions, I guess, and then another one that resulted in the potential loss of parking spaces, I believe, or it was harder
Yes,
to turn out?
islands in the median.
Islands. Is it possible that, since those were 2 plans and one plan might not be legal from a safety standpoint, that we refer back the previously discussed plan as an alternative?
I believe that'd be a better question for Peter Rice or Eric Eby.
Okay. Maybe that's something that can just be, in terms of, a lot of work has gone into that, a lot of discussion, and, coming up with another plan outside of this. And I know this was a preferred alternative to the other one, but it no longer meets or seems to meet the safety requirements. So if we can bring the other one as presented, just to save maybe consternation in terms of the neighborhood having to figure out another way to calm traffic there.
Agreed.
Right, but that is separate and then the action sheet. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, approval of grants and donations. Approval of Victims of Crime Act grant award to the Police Department to fund the Legal Department Victim Witness Advocate Program in the amount of $24,739.
Yes, Mayor, I move to approve and accept the grant as presented.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, approval of Source Water Protection Grant.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to enter into Amendment Number 1 of the grant agreement to extend the completion date of the $25,000 grant from the State of New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Local Source Water Protection Program by 1 year to a completion date of May 31st, 2025.
Second?
Any discussion? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just had a question around this. If they deny our request to extend the grant period, is it possible to complete this work if we race to complete it?
I think the intent would be to ask for the extension, and if we can't, we would work with the consultant on board to work within the confines of what they decide. But we generally think they would be supportive of this request. We are not the only person having trouble making sure vendors are cooperative and in this kind of work.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, this one's talking about some significant dough here. Approval of grant contract in the amount of $1 million for community campus upgrades project.
Your Honor, it's my pleasure to move to approve and accept this grant as presented.
Second?
Any discussion?
Can I just
Yeah,
really
talk
toot the
as long as you
horn?
want. but-
Recreation Director Todd Henley, who was 1 for 1 on getting grant money. On behalf of the full renovation and upgrade to the building we purchased, Todd submitted a grant request in the amount of $1 million to the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. The total project cost we understood from our contractor to be $2.5 million. You will recall the city supported $1.5 million in ARPA funding already for this work, so this will bring substantial changes to the building, which will include some much-needed tenant space updates and relocations to make the tenant space more efficient, timely and much-needed IT improvements and security upgrades, along with the ability to provide more programming and office space for our recreation department. So we were really fortunate to be one of one grant of $20 million that was allocated by this group. And we just found out last Friday that we formally got the grant, and oh, by the way, we need to sign a contract by March 29th. So thank you for letting us walk this on as a late addition. We needed your approval to be able to enter into that contract a week from Friday. And as mentioned here, the legal department will make sure that the contract that Todd and I sign will be appropriate.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you. We got the email today. This got added to the packet, and I immediately, sent a kudos to the city manager and her staff. I mean, $1 million grant is not a small achievement, and I'm sure the whole city is grateful for it.
And Todd is on Zoom right now.
Thanks, Todd.
Otherwise, he'd be here.
Thanks, Todd.
Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to thank Todd Henley. I work closely with him on the rec board, but kudos, Todd. Job well done. This $1 million going to community campus upgrades is just awesome. I'm excited for them.
Councilor Cook.
And again, I echo that. Thank you so much, Todd, for the work you did in getting this grant. This is an incredible assistance to the city in improving community campus.
Indeed. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, city manager with informational items.
Got a bunch of quick updates for you, Your Honor. The first one is a report back from the Planning Board about the request by Ms. McCormick to eliminate the waterfront business zoning along Salter Street. And the Planning Board discussed the matter and voted unanimously to leave the existing zoning in place until such time it is reevaluated through the master plan process. So that is Salter Street. Number two is in your packet we provided a written update relative to what's going on at the Hanover Garage. As you know, there's been some pain felt as we are chugging our way through. We're currently in year 2 of a major 3-year renovation project to allow the building to survive its useful life and to have a productive set of years ahead. This work will continue in general for the garage through early fall of 2025. The current phase of work involves the temporary closure of the facility's primary entrance and exit, and this phase began on January 2nd. We are scheduled to be complete with that on April 19th. We specifically picked this period of time as it is the slowest period of time, if there is such a thing, and that's a relative term here. The Parking Division has taken several mitigating actions to try and mitigate the pain of this. One more bit of big work to happen before the April 19th release of some of these pressure points will be extending to the elevator area, and at any point in time when floors are not accessible, other floors will be, and we will provide patron access at that time. So we know this is a pain point. Can't use that word pain enough. The parking folks have been as accommodating as they can. They understand what it's like to be in the garage and to wait. And we ask everyone for their patience. When this is over, the system we have at the Foundry Garage will be the same system at Hanover. It will be light years ahead in terms of technology and efficiency. So thank you for bearing with us. Happy to answer any questions about Hanover at this time.
Seeing none.
Other than that, I will keep going. At the request of Councilor Cook, there was a request, where's that green building policy we talked about? The Sustainability Committee worked internal to its own working group and larger as a committee, and requested that the policy be brought forth for my approval, which was approved and went into effect this past October. And the policy is included in your packet. It requires all new building construction or renovations over $2 million to be LEED Silver or equivalent. And in addition, the policy has several categories of green building systems to be considered when performing building upgrades, and they're listed in your packet. So we are proud to have that document be in full implementation mode. And I see a hand in Councilor Cook.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to thank the city manager for moving forward with this green buildings policy. And I specifically wanted to thank publicly Tory Brooks, who led that working group and who really brought a lot of expertise to this policy for the city of Portsmouth.
Thank you. City Attorney Morrow will provide an update on the Skip the Stuff ordinance.
Thank you. The city legal department was asked to determine if the proposed skip the stuff ordinance was authorized, if the city had legal authority to go forward with it. We believe that we do, but as written, there are a number of problems with the enforcement of the ordinance as written. So legal has been working with Councilor Cook in trying to develop a policy/initiative that would be an incentive program for the downtown businesses, restaurants, to in fact skip the stuff. And we're working with the health department and perhaps may be able to put something together in time for Student Government Day.
Which is, as a reminder, is going to be April 1st when the students shadow you all. And
April
sit here
Fool's
for the-
Day. That's great.
That's the fool, we put them in charge.
The Student Government Day will be on April 12th, but the real council meeting that they shadow is the next meeting on April 1st. Thank you, Susan. Quick update on the Peace Development Authority Board of Directors meeting. We met on March 14th. You will recall we don't meet in the months of February and July, so it had been a while since I provided an update. As always, it was nice to see Council Liaison Vince Lombardi there. So you'll be excited to know, and I believe the Assistant Mayor tested this out, the driving range opened last Friday, March 15th. The golf course is slated to open March 29th, which is it's actually a week later than last year. The weather is preventing it to open sooner. We've brought in a design consultant to consider the construction of an event center to take the place eventually of the tent that comes up every year. And right now, the tent can only accommodate 160 people, and those in the know of golf tournaments, I am not one of them, would tell you that a full golf tournament needs to accommodate 220 people, and that's what they're trying to do. The airport continues to be strong, even with strong capacity and competition in the region. There may be an increase in troop activity you may notice this summer with the Bangor Airport, Susan, Bangor, having one runway down this summer. And there was an interesting discussion of the Manchester International Airport because as agents of the state, we have to balance the needs with all competing interests. And I learned an interesting lesson that the Manchester project, the expansion of the airport, was funded with municipal bonds. And they've gone from a $40 million revenue stream to much less. And to understand that burden is being borne by the taxpayers of Manchester is something that colors our thinking about how we market our airport vis-a-vis Manchester. It was a very interesting conversation. Division of Ports and Harbors Director Gino Marconi gave a significant storm damage update. You will remember there was a huge storm in January. He showed before and after pictures. There's been a lot of work done to get things ready for the season. In a first, the Division of Ports and Harbors will bring forth a capital improvement plan. Believe it or not, they've never done that. And Corporate Drive reconstruction, for all of you who are driving on Corporate Drive and know how horrible it is, it will be underway this summer. So that's the PDA update. And lastly, from me, Your Honor, it would be a flash vote survey status update. Last week, for those of you who signed up to get the flash vote survey, we conducted a survey to assess better engagement and to properly allocate staffing resources on how to communicate. We had 387 people participate. That is only 51% of our overall signups, but it is still a large enough sample to be statistically valid. Unsurprisingly, most people, 80%, said they utilized the city's website for information. 25% of survey respondents are not active at all on social media. That was an interesting take. And receiving updates on projects, whether city managed or private, was of immense importance. So in some of the comments, which brought a wide variety of input, featured requests for keyword updates and, again, project update, meeting summaries, next steps on everything from development projects going before land use boards to policy or ordinance changes. So the data from this survey begins to indicate people would like self-service ways to keep up to date on the topics they're most interested in. So we will start to tailor our communication in that vein. That is it, and now we get to plug Student Government Day. There are 26 students coming this year, including a handful to represent school department, which was an addition from last year. Thanks.
Excellent. Councilor Blaylock.
I just had one question. I know we had talked about meeting some of the students at the school. Are we still doing that tomorrow?
We are still doing that tomorrow.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
What time tomorrow?
So if anyone at 2:30 to 3:30 is available to meet with the students and to help them come up with their agenda and come up with some ideas for them to work on at the Student Government Day.
We will meet at the high school. I think it's in the theater where we've had some meetings. Yep.
I would make a reminder for, as someone who goes to the school weekly, make sure to bring your ID. They really like it if you wear your city badge with your little picture on it, just to make sure you're not stealing any kids.
Any other miscellaneous? All right. We had a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.